Sarah. I'm very excited to be presenting today. Let me just share my screen. So I prepared a PowerPoint for all of you. So today I'm going to be talking about how to make the most of your school year. Usually at the beginning of the school year, there are a lot of opportunities, a lot of different events happening. It can get quite overwhelming. So this presentation is just to break down some of the main events that happen during the school year and how you can make the most of these opportunities. So let's get started. So the agenda for today, we're going to essentially split these opportunities into two aspects. So first I'll talk about returning to in-person and how you can make the most of the opportunities there. And then I'll get into some of the differences between in-person and virtual. And based on my experience and speaking with lots of students, I think the biggest one is networking. So I'll be talking about how to essentially do networking in a virtual environment. Okay, so let's talk first about the recruitment season for in-person. So I've split this into three sections. You can see here, networking, jobs, and interviews. It's kind of in the process of how you find a job. So you network first and then you apply and then you can get an interview and then hopefully you get the job. So let's talk about networking first. I've split this into a few points. So these are definitely some of the things that throughout my career I've learned were quite important and are some of the main things that employers look for when you're networking. So the biggest one, first of all, is having an elevator pitch. Now, I don't know if you've heard about this, but an elevator pitch is essentially you want to have a 15 to 20-second introduction about yourself, your background, essentially how you qualify or how you relate to the industry that you're applying to. So the actuarial industry, for example. So the elevator pitch, I usually like to structure it in the following way. So give your name, and then I would talk about my academic background, so where I study, what I study, and then maybe one or 2 points about your employment background if it's relevant to the industry. And then finally, maybe a few fun facts about yourself. So that basically covers the elevator pitch. Usually when you're networking, employers will ask you to introduce yourself, and that's when you would give that pitch. Next, I'll talk about learning about the industry. So this is a pretty big one. When you're talking to recruiters, when you're talking to industry professionals, you want to show that you have curiosity and that you're interested in the industry. So some of the things that would help you demonstrate that are knowing a few buzzwords. So for example, in Canada right now, some of the popular buzzwords or trending topics are how data science relates or is taking over the actuarial field, actually. And then there's also IFRS 17, which is a new reporting standard. So knowing about these trending topics and buzzwords will help you demonstrate some interest in the industry. And then finally, general intuition about the industry. So for example, in insurance, you want to be able to have a general intuition of what it means to be in insurance, what it means when you're selling your product. So for example, if you're pricing car insurance, you want to kind of have an idea of what you need to consider when you're pricing car insurance. So for example, the age of the person that you want to insure, perhaps their neighborhood where they live. If they're living in a big city, it's probably more risky than if they're living in the country. So having a general intuition like that will really help you as well. Next, I want to talk about the recruitment season. So in Canada, our recruitment season starts in the fall, right when school starts. And so you want to be able to prepare for that recruitment season ahead of time, have your elevator pitch ready, have your resume and everything ready. And always be on the lookout for opportunities when your recruitment season starts. And then another way to expand your network is at large conferences. So for example, this conference that we're at right now, there are lots of great opportunities to network and to learn from industry professionals. And not only will you be able to expand your network, but you'll also be able to learn more about the industry. Attending webinars such as these will help you a lot in terms of what you need to know, and helping you kind of gain more clarity about the industry that you're trying to apply to. So yeah, it's great that you guys are all here. And then next I want to talk about targeting companies. And so when you're networking and you want to apply for certain jobs, for example, if you want to apply to a pretty big life insurance company, you want to do a lot of research on that company before you talk to the representatives there. And that just shows that you have initiative and that you're really interested in the company. As an employer, obviously, you would want to hire someone who wants to be at your company rather than someone who's just talking to every single recruiter there is. And so that really helps you stand out a lot as a student. You can also learn more about these companies through networking with different people, and through finding mentors who work at the companies. And they can tell you a lot more about the products that they offer and why they're unique compared to their competitors. Last but not least, LinkedIn. It's really important to have a good LinkedIn profile. This way, when you're attending these large conferences, such as the one that Axe Mexico is hosting, or for ASNA, we have a really big conference in January. Lots of people will ask to add you on LinkedIn. They can be students or they can be industry professionals. And LinkedIn is just a great way to kind of put yourself out there and to be a part of the community, show that you're part of the community. That way, when you are going on LinkedIn, you can see what other students are doing and get ideas from there. And you can also talk to other industry professionals, reach out to them, ask questions, and sometimes those questions will lead to job opportunities. So let's move on to jobs. So the next part, you've expanded your network, you've talked to lots of people, you've done all your research. Where can you apply to these jobs? So here are a few suggestions. This is just one example of a job board that you can find. I'm sure that there are lots of other actuarial bodies who also have job boards. So one example is the ASNA CIA job board. So we do a collaboration with the Canadian Institute of Actuaries, where we post co-op opportunities for students. You can also find jobs from your school job board online. I know at my university, we also have an email list where there was one employee from the university who collects a lot of information about internships. Oftentimes these internship opportunities don't even show up on the job board. And a lot of the times they can be exclusive to your school. So I would highly suggest you to stay up to date with opportunities that your school might offer. But next, you can find lots of job opportunities online on the websites of various companies, especially during the recruitment season. So keep an eye out for that and start early on your applications. Sometimes they can be done on a rolling basis, so it's more like a first come, first serve. As soon as you apply, you might be added to the interview process. Next, info sessions. So similar to networking, you'll have a recruitment season, and there will be lots of companies offering info sessions throughout this recruitment season. And so At these info sessions are where you can talk to employers and find out about any job opportunities that their company might offer. And last but not least, large conferences. Oftentimes, even if the conference might not have a formal job fair, you can network and you can essentially build your own job. I know quite a few people who have created jobs from their network because they have connected with the team so well. Okay, now let's move on to interviews. So I think the biggest thing to note about interviews is that getting one is an achievement in and of itself. Getting an interview means that your resume has passed the screening process. So what that means is that they were impressed by your skills and impressed by your background. And what the interview essentially does is it evaluates your suitability as a member of the team. So they're looking at your personality, how you might get along with people and work in a team. So how can we, essentially, interviews are a very delicate balance. What they are essentially evaluating you is how well you work as a person. So you have to present the best version of yourself, of course. And to present the best version of yourself, you need to practice, practice, practice. So you can get down, how to balance being enthusiastic, but also being authentic. It's very important to show a very your authentic self, but to also, keep it polished. So to gain that balance, seek out as many practice opportunities as you can. You can practice with your friends, practice with classmates at school, but it's also very important to practice with people who have industry experience. So for example, professors, or if you have a mentor who works in the industry, it's also really, really helpful to practice with them as well. Oftentimes mentors, because they're so involved, they also tend to be a part of the recruitment process. So getting feedback from them is like getting feedback from an actual interviewer. And you can often find a lot of these opportunities through your school. So keeping up to date with, school emails, also keeping up to date with your clubs, school clubs, and that way you can find sessions where they are doing where they're conducting interview practices. You can also practice with industry mentors and student peer mentors as well. I'll move on to the interview structure. So based on my experience doing interviews, there is a general structure that employers all follow. So first and foremost is they'll introduce themselves, and then they'll ask you to introduce yourself. And that's where you'll give your elevator pitch. So this is the same elevator pitch that you'll give when you're networking, except maybe you want to go slightly more into detail about your experiences. So how I would like to structure my elevator pitch is I would usually tell them about my academic background, and then I'll talk about maybe actuarial exams that I've done, and then I'll go slightly more into depth, maybe 1 or 2 sentences about past experiences that are relevant to the job that I'm applying to. So yeah, and then following the elevator pitch, the employer will generally ask about your experiences. So they'll have reviewed your resume and they'll pick out a few points that they think are interesting and ask you about that. And when they're asking you about your experiences, you want to structure your responses such that it's very clear and easy to understand. And what I like to use is called the STAR method. So it's situation, task, action, and resolution. So generally what you want to do is you want to do 1 or 2 sentences under each section. So situation, you're laying out what the situation was. Task, you're telling them about what your responsibilities were. Action, so what did you do to complete the task, or maybe what did you do to resolve the conflict? And then resolution, is, I think, the most important part is what did you learn from the experience, and what can you reflect upon what has happened, and how can you take that into your future roles. I think the STAR method is a really great way of essentially summarizing something in a very clear way. And most importantly, it shows what you've learned from your past experiences, which is something that employers love to see. They love to see you being able to reflect on what you've done and taking those experiences into the future. Next, so I've listed two kind of strange questions here. What is a normal distribution and how many windows are in Toronto? I've been asked these questions before in interviews and they completely caught me off guard. What these questions are trying to do is they're trying to catch you off guard and they're trying to see how you think. So I'll talk first about what is a normal distribution. So employers can ask something that's very similar to the question that I've listed here. They'll ask you to explain something that is very specific to your field, and that can get quite technical. But they want you to do it in a way that's communicable to people who are outside of your field. Often as an actuary, you're required to communicate with people outside of your department. And while we can get very much into our heads with all the numbers and theories and everything, it's also important to be able to summarize it in a way that's understandable for people who might not have the same background as we do. So this is essentially what the question is trying to test you at is, can you explain something that's very technical in a way that's easily understandable? I can give an example of how you might answer this question. Obviously, might not be the most thought out or the most easiest, but what I would basically say for this is a normal distribution is a way we show how different things might be distributed. And it's often easiest to give a concrete example. So for example, we can use height. If you took the heights of say 100 people in a random sample, you would have less people who are on either extreme, so less people who are super tall or super short. And then as you get closer and closer to the average height, you'll have more people falling under each category. So that is kind of how I would explain it. So I think the most important takeaway here is that when they ask you this, try to think of something very concrete to talk about, and that helps ground what you're trying to say and prevent it from being too abstract. Next, how many windows are in Toronto? So these kinds of impossible questions are questions where they're trying to see how you think and how you might go about collecting data. For this, I would say don't panic. And then one strategy that I've used in the past is try to think of a way to extrapolate it. So for example, how many windows are in Toronto? Maybe you can say something like this. You can say, oh, I'll take a sample of 5 buildings in Toronto. I'll count all of the windows on the buildings, and then I will take an average. And of course, the buildings, you want them to be various sizes so that so that there's kind of an even distribution of windows. So then after you say that, you would have an average of how many windows there are per building, and then count how many buildings there are in Toronto, multiply it by the average. So yeah, I would say the takeaway from this question is be very clear in your response. If it takes you a bit of time to think of a strategy, take that time, it's totally fine. And then try to do something where you're collecting a sample and then extrapolating it to the general population. That is something I would say has worked quite well for me in the past. Yeah, so that's basically the general structure of an interview. And then finally, I would say at the end of an interview, the employer will generally ask you, do you have any questions for me? One thing that I like to do that I found has worked quite well is asking my interviewers about what they do and about what they find interesting about their work. It shows that you have curiosity for what you're getting into for the job, and it shows that you care about your interviewers. So generally, what I've done is I've taken notes at the beginning when everyone is introducing themselves, and I'll just write down essentially their name and what they do, and then I will ask them at the end of the interview about what it is that interests them about their work. Okay, so that's the end of the recruitment season. Next, I'll talk about how to get involved. So, so beyond finding jobs, what you want to do as a student is you want to enjoy your life at school. I would say school clubs, not only are they a great way to help you prepare your resume, but they're also a great way to make friends and to expand your network and to enjoy yourself. So I would highly encourage you to join whatever interests you. That is something that I found actually works quite well when you're interviewing as well, because employers like to see you being a unique individual. They like to see you being passionate about what you do. So the clubs that you join don't necessarily have to be actuarial related or finance related. But if you do want to join something actuarial related, they're also a fantastic way to develop your employability skills. So they help you become more independent, organize your time. They help you learn how to work on a team. All fantastic traits that really help you grow as an individual. So student clubs and societies, ASNA or Ax Mexico are great ways to develop yourself. I know since I've become president-elect, I've been challenged in many ways that I didn't think I'd be able to be challenged. There are lots of moving parts to running an organization that I was totally unprepared for. I also joined some finance-related clubs because I was interested in gaining the financial acumen that would be required for my job. And it also doesn't hurt to do some research. I think the great thing about actuarial science, data science in general, is that it's very multifaceted. You can get into the business aspect, you can get into the theoretical aspect, and all of those will help you to becoming a better actuary. So don't limit yourselves. Do whatever it is that interests you. There are also other great ways to develop your employability. Lots of actuarial societies offer student programs, and those are very low pressure ways to help you ask around, ask all the questions that you need, and gain a better understanding of the industry. And then second last is case competitions. They're also a great way for you to demonstrate what you've learned and to apply what you have learned in school. And that ties also into inventing your own, starting your own projects, starting your own club. Those are all great ways to, apply theory, also learn more about certain coding languages that might be used in the industry. And yeah, if you see a need for a certain club or for specific service at your school, I know at my school, my friend started a mentorship program, peer-to-peer mentorship program for students, and a lot of students found that to be really helpful. So yeah, don't hesitate to go beyond what is generally the set path for getting involved as an actuarial student. You can do so many things, and all of them will benefit you in the future. Okay, I just wanted to sort of end this section by reminding everyone to stay balanced. It's very overwhelming, especially if you are trying to build your resume, you're trying to get involved in all of these things, but you're also out there networking and you're also interviewing and applying to jobs. It's a lot of things at once. And so, you don't have to take on everything at once. You can save your first year to just enjoy yourself and don't think about applying to jobs, and just learn more about the industry or get involved in what you like to do. Don't have to get everything done at once. There's some people who who even after they get an internship decide to go out of the actuarial field. So it's just a reminder to, stay balanced and true to yourself, and yeah, don't get too overwhelmed, and know to take a step back if you need to. Okay, I'll move on to the final section of this presentation, which is the virtual aspect. So during this past year, we've all been stuck at home, stuck online, going through Zoom classes. And I know that from my experience and from talking to a lot of students, being virtual has been quite difficult in terms of networking and finding a job. A lot of the times it's hard to communicate who you are through a screen. I mean, just look at me now. You can only see the upper half of my body. You can't even see my body language. So yeah, it's quite difficult. So I've offered a few tips here in terms of networking. And this obviously also applies to interviews and talking and applying to jobs. You want to essentially present the most polished version of yourself, but also be vibrant enough to communicate yourself through the screen. So here are some tips that I've learned through my year stuck at home, is that you want to be careful of your background and lighting. So generally what I like to do is I like to have a clean background. It can be a blank wall. It can be something that's something that's not too distracting, and you want to have good lighting that shows your face. That way it's easier for the person you're talking to as well to see your expressions and see what you're thinking. And then secondly, you want to dress clean and be semi-formal. Obviously, this will change depending on the type of event, but generally you don't want your clothes to take away too much from what you're saying and be too distracting. Of course, it's also important to be able to express who you are through how you dress. So just be cognizant of that balance between distracting and showing your personality. I think thirdly, research is even more important when it comes to networking than compared to in person, because oftentimes when you're networking virtually, you'll be speaking one-on-one or maybe two-on-one with an employer, and oftentimes it happens that you'll have awkward silences, and those awkward silences are not the best when it's virtual, because it's just complete silence. So you want to do a lot of research to be able to ask a lot of questions, and to also demonstrate to the employer that you're interested. And then fourthly, you want to speak up. It's very important for your employer to be able to hear you, not only hear you, but to show that you have confidence. I know sometimes it can seem quite tiring to be stuck on a screen and talking to people all day, but it's very important that you do speak up, because that shows that you're confident, and it also shows to the employer that you're engaged. Of course, always having your elevator pitch, and I would say, similar to doing lots of research, engaging in the conversation is very important, because when you're talking through a screen, it's even easier for the employer to assess what you're saying. And you want to be able to follow up or speak in the conversation in a way that shows that you're listening and you're thinking about what the employer is saying. And that becomes all the more evident in a virtual environment when there are less distractions around you. So yes, so be careful, engage in the conversation, try not to have a laundry list of questions to ask. It's important to do follow-up questions as well. Lastly, don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. Questions about, general information about the industry. Everyone knows that you're a student and you're trying to learn, and asking as many questions as you can shows that you're interested and you want to get involved. And then last but not least, take notes. It's so much easier when you're on a computer to just pull up a Word document and take notes. And it also shows that when you follow up with something that the employer has said earlier in the conversation, it shows you've been listening. So that also reflects really well on you. So yeah, these are a few tips that I've kind of generalized through my experience. Of course, this is by no means a comprehensive list of how you can make the most of your school year. There's so many different ways. And I encourage all of you to go about and find your own way and to pursue what you're passionate about. So yeah, I hope that this has been helpful, and I would love to take any questions that you have. I would have to say, definitely as a student, there are lots of different exciting activities. I can't really choose, but I would say right now, as president-elect, it really surprises me how much is on my shoulders. And I think having the freedom as well take initiatives and to start programs that will benefit students has been really exciting for me. Just thinking about, and putting into action things that will really help students. That has definitely been the most exciting. I would say the most difficult aspect is knowing when to stop. It's so easy to, once you get started to talking about yourself, to just tell your employer everything about you in hopes that something will catch their interest. And so I would say the most important part is knowing how to summarize and what are the most important and interesting parts about you. It's really important for you to be confident in your experiences when you're sharing that with your employer. So definitely being good at summarizing. I did get a recommendation from the president of ASNA, Never Eat Alone, by Keith and Tal. I can't say I've ever read the book before, but I would say if you want suggestions on good leadership books, it's very you can find a lot of really good ones on Goodreads. I would say ones that have a lot of 5-star reviews. And I've also read a few books about just general political leaders in the past, and reading about their mentality when it comes to managing people has been very helpful as well. So in terms of resumes and cover letters, I think it really depends on the context. So I would say if you're applying online, always look at what they're asking for online. If they're asking for just a resume, only apply with the resume, don't add a cover letter. If they're asking for both, obviously send both. If it is talking to a recruiter, oftentimes they'll just ask you for a resume. I know when it is more, face-on-face interaction, it tends to be more casual. So you can often just send your resume and it'll be good enough. A cover letter is generally very formal. It's when you're essentially formally applying to jobs. So that can be online, or maybe if they need a formal application to HR, then they might ask for it. I would say it has to be the first interview I ever went to. It was an interview with a pretty big life insurance company. So I was very intimidated. And during the interview, I kind of froze when they asked me about my background, because I didn't really prepare for it that well. And so I wasn't quite sure what to highlight. And then And their question caught me off guard too. It was like, tell me about a time you failed and what did you learn from it? Obviously, no one likes to talk about when they failed. And when you're answering those failure questions, you don't want to talk about an actual terrible failure, because then that will that will make the employer question how qualified you are. So definitely for those questions, you need to prepare ahead of time. And I did not, and I wasn't sure what to answer with. So yeah, that was not a good interview. I'm not sure if this is in terms of networking when I'm talking to many people. When generally when you're networking, you're talking to one or two people at most. So I would say it's not too bad when you're talking to one person. If you're interacting with multiple people, I would say the most important thing is just staying engaged in the conversation. If you're too stuck in your head about how you come off or how you're presenting yourself, it can get very distracting, very nerve-wracking. So just stay engaged with what they're talking about, and then stay curious and think about the things that other people are saying. Yeah. Not sure if I answered that question well. I would say is knowing what is best for the students. Oftentimes, you might, coming from being president-elect, you don't know sort of what's going on at each university, and you don't really know the general experience of students that students have with your organization. From inside the organization, it looks like I'm offering so many opportunities, but oftentimes these opportunities are not that helpful. So I think the most difficult part is creating initiatives and maintaining them in a way that remains helpful to students and that continues to help them develop into actuaries. As to what we need to be a good leader, that's a very difficult question. I'm not sure if I can answer that even, but I would say listening to your teammates. I think that's probably the most important thing. Making sure your teammates know that they're being heard. I have to admit, I still have difficulty managing my time. I would say keeping a calendar. I like to I'm working right now, so I like to kind of have everything on my work calendar. That way I can see all my work meetings and other meetings all at once. Outside of that, I would say managing my time, I need to take some time off for myself in order to feel productive, or to find the drive to do work. So being able to recognize when I'm feeling overwhelmed and reaching out for help is something that I found really helped me.